Good morning, 10th of August 2021. It's the Celtic Ways morning briefing at still, I suppose, the start of a big week for Celtic. Europa League on Thursday and the League Cup last 16 tie against Hearts on Sunday. So, quite a lot on the line, Sean. We'll have a look ahead to those games and we'll have a quick chat as well about a potential new striker just to kick things off. It's Thomas Henry. We're saying Henry, aren't we? Not Thomas Henry. He's a Frenchman, so I will assume Thomas Henry that plays for Leuven in the Belgian top flight, was the second top scorer last season. It seems like quite a big guy, Sean, 1 meter 90, so he's certainly no dwarf. He started the season well for them, 3 appearances, 3 goals. And I think that last season he was very prolific as well. So he's a different kind of striker to Furuhashi, different kind of striker to Griffiths and Ayeti. Is this something that you're excited by?
I'm intending to take a deep dive into him today, so a shameless plug. Keep your eyes peeled for that. But I think it certainly seems like a more physical option, which you could argue we don't have just now. We've spoken about it before. Like Ajeti's probably the most physical striker, and he's not necessarily actually that physical when you see him on the pitch. From kind of cursory bit of research into Henry. He seems physical, but not necessarily reliant on that to get his goals. So I think it's good to have a different option. But at the same time, you've seen how effective a striker with really good, sharp movement can be in Kyogo the last couple of games. So as much as it's good to have an alternative to that, and it will be good to have an alternative to that, you'd need to ask, would they fit in with the style of the players round about them as well? So hopefully I'll try and answer that later on.
You'd imagine that this would be completely dependent on whether Odsonne Edouard stays or goes, yeah?
I would imagine so. If the fee being talked about is accurate, which is I think it's 7 million they're talking about, then I would imagine that it is totally dependent on Edward.
I think that you can draw some parallels with Ayeti, right? So Ayeti had his prolific season in the Swiss top flight with Basel. That was season before last. No, the season before last. And that was 32 games, 14 goals. It was a good return for Basel. He then had his stint at West Ham, but when Celtic signed him, he was coming into the club not filled with confidence, which I think can then be quite hard to just pick up that and completely run with it when you sign for a new club. Whereas Henry would be coming in off the back of some serious form. And you wonder how much that can impact someone when they do arrive. Maybe like Furuhashi, who came to the club having been the top scorer in the J League.
I think that makes a difference. I think you're right there. I think that definitely does impact the way that they approach it. As I mean, seems obvious to say, but footballers are human. Like they do get impacted by things like that. What I would say is we've kind of touched on the fee already, but like if Celtic are going to pay that kind of money for someone, you would imagine that they'll start most games when fit. And I know he's only played a couple of games so far, but Kyogo has really impressed centrally. So what I would ask is, does this mean that he's kind of going to be pushed out wide more often if Henry signs? I suppose it's good to have options either way. But I don't know what you think about that. Would that kind of preempt a switch for Kyogo more often than not?
Yeah, I think at least he's capable of that. Furuhashi, when we were doing our research for the site on him when he was signed out of nowhere, really, he did kind of float between the two positions, left wing and centrally. Considering how he started centrally, it would seem a bit of a surprising move to shift him back out wide because he has hit the ground running. And we've got an article live today about how well Furuhashi started in his performance against Dundee. But I think what you can say about it is that his movement and how well he plays off the last shoulder is also applicable out wide. You know, if he finds himself in between the centre back and the full back, or on the other side of the full back, he can get in behind and latch onto through balls. And if you've got people like Christie and Turnbull, they're going to feed him whether he's playing centrally or out wide. I think that Celtic, if they do sign another centre forward, if it is Thomas Henry, then you've got Forrest, Abada, and Furuhashi now available on the wing, which is a totally different ballgame to last season.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, on that point, I think from what I've read about him already, on most of Henry, in fact, I think all his kind of top flight goals have came inside the box, which obviously you might think, well, he's a big target man and stuff, but regardless, from what I've seen, his movement's been quite good in the box. He does like to score with his head, and right now, the way that Postecoglou's kind of wanting us to play, it's more cutbacks rather than crosses.
Yeah.
So you would need to kind of ask how good his movement is to get on the end of cutbacks rather than crosses. But at the saying that, I mean, if Forrest is playing, Forrest likes that wee dink into the middle. So is that so far fetched that that's a great option to maybe have?
No, it's a fair point. I mean, this guy has been scoring goals over in Belgium. And I think when we look at his career, he's not a player, Thomas Henry, that was released by one of the more prominent clubs in France or Belgium or that part of Europe. He has come from a low level and is building his career up, and he's slowly getting better moves. He's only been at Leuven for a couple of seasons, so he's impressed enough now to get the attention of some other clubs. I think there were actually, I think it was Ghent in Belgium that are also apparently sniffing around. So domestically, yeah, he's impressing the big boys. But if you look at his stats from last season, 21 goals in 31 games, 6 assists on top of that. So, I mean, he's a guy that is certainly producing for them. One thing that I would mitigate this with is that Celtic have got quite an extensive history of signing guys that are doing fairly well in a European league. Not any of the elite ones, but people like Bio, for example, that then come over and don't produce. Would that be along your thinking at all?
I don't think so. No, I think there's always that risk with any of the transfers from any league. I don't necessarily think it matters whether it's a Central European league or League One in Scotland or wherever in England. I think there's always a risk with a transfer, how they fit in, style wise, confidence wise, how they settle off the pitch, stuff like that. I think all that comes into account no matter what league you come from, really.
Okay, fair enough. Well, let's move on from Henri and talk about someone that's been at Celtic for a long time already, Tom Rogic. I think it feels like he's been edging towards the exit door for some amount of time. Really, he's not really been the same player the last 18 months as he was when Brendan Rodgers was the manager, when he was pretty much the first choice playmaker in the squad. But maybe a wee bit of a renaissance here. He was started against Dundee at the weekend, scored a goal. I think I heard in Sports Scene actually it was his first league goal at Celtic Park in 3 years, which is quite phenomenal to be honest. But do you think there's a way back for Tom Rogic here into the Celtic fold? He's got competition for places.
I think so. I mean, it was a rare start, obviously, but he did show glimpses of what we all remember on Sunday, particularly linking up with Kyogo. He obviously should have had an assist in the first half, if not for that goal line clearance. And then he made that nice late run into the box to finish off Christie's pass. I thought it was a decent performance. I thought he was quite quiet in the first half. Although the stats actually show he was quieter in the second half, so maybe I don't know what I'm watching. But I think you've got to remember that Postecoglou managed him for Australia as well. And he didn't always pick him to start, but he did have him in and about the squad. So he knows, you would think anyway, he knows him well enough to know exactly what he's getting and he'll know how to utilise him and when. And I think maybe there was some eyebrows raised on Sunday when it was Turnbull and Rogic starting. But it worked out well. And I think it wouldn't be a surprise to see that happening fairly regularly this season at Parkhead when clubs are coming and they're going to be sitting with a low block and just sitting so deep. You might see McGregor replacing the likes of Sorrow and maybe McCarthy and kind of orchestrating it from deeper rather than letting him go forward to let the likes of Rogic and Turnbull both start together and kind of get in the thick of things in the final third. And it worked well against Dundee. So I think he has got a role to play now.
I don't think it's rocket science or discovering the theory of relativity to suggest that perhaps Tom Rogic and Ange Postecoglou will work well together. As you say, they've got a prior history, a relationship from the Australian national team, and I think just maybe having a compatriot around will maybe change the way that Tom Rogic is viewing his role in this Celtic team, because I don't think it's a ridiculous assessment to say that probably he might have felt his time was up at Celtic and that things were moving on, and he'd had his influence in the team over the seasons that he did with Brendan Rodgers specifically. But now he's got a familiar face there, someone maybe to reinvigorate and energise the way that he feels about the club, and maybe he does see future here rather than maybe going to try his luck elsewhere.
I agree with you. I certainly think it did look as if, I think to everybody, that maybe his time was coming to an end. But he's a useful player to have, certainly when he's in form. I mean, he showed it a wee bit in Sunday, and as I say, Postecoglou is well placed to know exactly how to use him and when. Don't expect him to start every week, but I think he'll get game time. Yeah.
Well, it's a massive week for Celtic, and I think that Rogic has had, I suppose, some elements of the sport on his back for consistently playing only maybe 60 or 70 minutes rather than lasting a full 90. So who knows if we'll see Rogic play against Jablonec on Thursday and then Hearts on Sunday. But these are two big games for Celtic. It's a knockout week, and the season doesn't hinge on it. The most important thing is the league title, but to get through or to be knocked out one or both cups in a week can certainly tilt your season in a balance, I suppose, especially with such a big game against Rangers coming up at the end of the month.
It's massive, aye. I mean, there's no getting away from that for me. It's the fact that they've just won 2 6-goal thrillers as well actually means that now the expectation is that you continue that, you see off your Blonets, and then you get your revenge on Hearts. I think do both of those, and the feel good factor will be sky high, and that's the kind of thing that can properly kickstart a campaign.
I wonder as well, actually, right? And personally, I don't like it. I'm quite when I was growing up, and it would be the same for you. The CIS Cup was in March. The final was in March. I'm not sure what the attraction is to have the final before the Christmas break, to be honest. But it can getting a trophy under the belt, as we saw with Brendan Rodgers, can be such a massive factor in pushing the season on. And I think a good run in that cup and potentially lifting it is something that, again, like I mentioned a minute ago, can just tilt the balance for the rest of the season and provide a launch pad, I suppose, because let's make no bones about it. The league is the most important, probably followed by the Scottish Cup. The League Cup is the least prestigious trophy of the three, but it's a major trophy nonetheless, and it has to be taken seriously, I suppose. So this game against Hearts at the weekend on Sunday, I suppose people might think, oh, it's just Hearts in the last 16 of the Cup, and I do think it actually has come at a bad time that Celtic don't have another league game straight away to build upon after the Dundee game at the weekend there. But I think that if Celtic can progress in this with a convincing performance, as you say, get revenge on Hearts for the opening day defeat, and things are continually just slowly turning around.
Mm-hmm. I think in terms of the League Cup, I think it used to be always before Christmas, but it doesn't really bother me
before our childhoods, I think.
It doesn't really bother me either way when it is. But again, like yeah, you are right that in terms of the kind of hierarchy of trophies, that's the bottom of the three, but it's still a trophy and it's still something that every club should want to win, but certainly Celtic. But it's one of those ones that, because it comes around quite early in the season, you're right that if you win it, it's a confidence booster, sets you up nicely, gets you used to the winning feeling and all that. But conversely, if you lose it, depending on the context of how you lose it, it can just as easily be used to kind of drive you on to get the league in the Scottish Cup as well. So it really depends on the kind of mentality going into it and coming out it as to how much you let it affect your season, or if it's a positive or negative kind of thing, I think
Celtic should have too much for Jablonec on Thursday. The tie is heavily weighted in Celtic's favour now after the first leg, but Hearts have started the season well. That I think there's much to be wary about for the Hearts game. I think they've come up with a bit of bite about them after the way that they were relegated. Point to prove, possibly. They've certainly started well with the win over Celtic and then St Mirren away from home.
I think so. I mean, they're a decent squad. I mean, we saw that against Celtic that they are quite good. Celtic still arguably could have won that game, but again, the fact that they've finally put in a couple of decent performances, scored the goals, not conceded in one of the games for once. I think see off your Blonets first and foremost, and then definitely I think the Hearts game is a kind of, I think Alison mentioned it yesterday. It is a kind of let's see how far we've come in a couple of weeks, because it's so soon after the disappointment. It's an immediate chance for kind of revenge and to show them really what they're all about, rather than the performance from Tynecastle.
Just before we finish up, we've got Fuzz, a PSV fan, here in the comments asking what's happening with Karamoko Dembele. That's an interesting point, because he was involved in the first team in pre-season. Celtic have strengthened out wide. We just touched on that earlier with the signings of Abada and Furuhashi, depending on where Postecoglou decides to play him. Is there any first team opportunities here for Karamoko, especially this season, maybe just even as a backup from the bench?
As far as I'm aware, he's still carrying an injury. Both he and can't remember, somebody else went off injured against Bristol City, and Mikey Johnston, that's who it was. Mikey Johnston and Karamoko both went off injured against Bristol City, and I don't think either of the two of them are fit, because I think we always forget Mikey Johnston still to come back as well and could easily play a role in this team. But as far as I'm aware, Ange quite liked Karamoko when he saw him at the start of the season. He came away with a comment that I had in my squad depth chart piece, that he was keen to get involved in the first team, and he saw no reason to hold him back from that. That he quite liked the style of play, and he quite thought that Karamoko would fit in with his system. So I think that all bodes well for him to get some minutes. Where that is will depend on the manager, obviously, but you would imagine possibly wide right. That's obviously a very, very young couple of right wingers there.
Yeah, true. Just interesting though. I wonder if his name's popped up on the PSV forums or something. Why that's that question's come in there from Holland. No, okay, that'll wrap us up today, Sean. Bigger things to come later in the week, and we'll be able to speculate who might play and how things might go on Thursday against Jablonec, and we'll see if Celtic can get through to play Alkmaar in the playoff round. So let's see what happens. Cheers, mate.
Cheers.